Thursday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports for CLE. Thanks for joining us. First round of the NFL draft, only a few hours away. Browns likely get involved at the second round tomorrow. Solomon Wilcott, NFL analyst for SiriusXM's Opening Drive, on the possibility of the Browns trading Greg Newsome and what he's hearing. This from 92.3 The Fans, The Afternoon Drive.
I'm hearing on the street that they could end up making a move to get a second-round selection by dealing Greg Newsome. You guys have a glut of these really good cornerbacks, and Andrew Berry can look to pick up a draft pick by moving a player.
Do you think it makes sense for them to trade Greg Newsome for a second-round pick?
Yes, it does, and here's why: because you have three starters at corner. And how many corners do you actually start with on defense?
Well, I mean, you know this, Solomon. At this day and age, you're so much nickel. What is it, 70% nickel? I sort of consider a nickel a starter. I'm not sure about you.
Well, I think you do, but guess what you don't do? You don't pay nickel corners the top dollar. Think about L'Jarius Sneed. Are you going $20 million a year? You don't pay nickel corners $20 million a year. He's due a new contract. He's on the clock. He's next. Is he better than Martin Emerson Jr.? You can argue whether he is or isn't, but you could say they're both equal, right? So if you have a glut at one position, it usually means it's a trade commodity. Do you need more? Yeah, but you trust in your ability to continue to develop the cornerbacks on your team, but you don't feel like you have to overpay your nickel corner top of the market. Greg Newsome doesn't see himself as a guy who's going to take less than market value. So are you going to pay him $20 million a year? I think that's the question. $15 million a year, that's the question. Probably not. And if you're not, you don't wait till the middle of the year to trade him.
With that, let's welcome in Quincy Carrier, Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. So, Quincy, I don't know if they could get a second-round pick for Greg Newsome. If they could, you might be able to convince me they should trade him. What are your thoughts on that?
I would just point out Greg Newsome played the third most snaps on this defense last year out of all of the players there, right? There's Martin Emerson, there's Myles Garrett, there's Greg Newsome. So he's absolutely a starting player. I mean, he's played more snaps than Denzel Ward did, or even Grant Delpit, guys who we no question call starters on this defense. So he is an important cog in this. And I would also not be so quick to assume what his market value is going to be. I see a lot of people jumping like, oh, it's going to be 20, it's going to be 15. Like, let's just see where the market takes him, right? And see what he's willing to take and see how creative the Browns can be to offer him something that might be worthwhile. They've been creative about this in the past. I don't think it's a done deal, lost cause. They're not going to be able to bring him back. They might even think about trying to extend him so they can avoid some paying the full fifth-year option on him. But I think the math on Greg Newsome is a little bit more complicated than people make it out to be. And I don't think it's as simple as, well, he plays the third cornerback position. He doesn't start. We can move him. He's expendable. I don't think he's necessarily that expendable. Now, if they think Cam Mitchell can come in and go from playing, 200 snaps or less than 100 snaps to playing 770 for this team, then that's a projection they have to make and be very confident in. But you do have to ask yourself, like, if you do trade Greg Newsome for a second-round pick, who's playing those snaps? Because it's not insignificant at all.
All right. The other thing is that $20 million doesn't take effect next year because we're assuming, I believe it's May 2nd, they have to pick up his fifth-year option. That's $13 million plus, 13 and some change. So, again, that's something that'll work itself out. But, second-round pick, I'd be surprised. That's usually a third is what you get for veterans that can play pretty well. All right, we'll move on. Bold predictions for every team in the NFL draft. This is from Yardbarker. For the Browns, they trade up with limited capital. Most think the Browns will stand pat or trade back to acquire more draft capital. Trading up for an impact player shouldn't be ruled out for a team without a ton of holes to fill. I could see him trading up 10 spots. I don't know what it would cost them. Remember, they don't have a lot of picks.
Yeah, I mean they'll try to trade up from like 85 and maybe 153, right? Like those are going to be the ones where those extra 7th and 6th round picks. You have to remember the Browns also have 5, 6, and 7th round picks next year. They're in no position to roster 5, 6, and 7th round picks in the next couple of years. So they're going to use that as ammunition to kind of move up, but that's not move up in the 2nd round ammunition. That's move up into the 4th round ammunition, or move up from the 3rd round, maybe 10 spots. So I don't think 54 is where you'll see a trade up. I just don't think they have the ammunition to do that. But at 85, 156, maybe even at 206, them moving up from those spots and cashing out and saying, hey, we're going to take 4 players, but we're going to take them in the top 160 of the draft, I think might be a strategy that the Browns try to use here.
All right. I know you've addressed this one on your show. Draft prospects you'd love for the Browns to get, and I'm sure within reason.
Oh, yeah. So Roger Rosengarten's one that I'm very intrigued on. The scouting community's all over the place on him. You'll read a draft board and he's a 4th round pick somewhere. I'll talk to somebody else and they'll tell me he's not going to get past 25. He does not have the elite length that you want or the elite strength that you want, but I think he was at the Senior Bowl. He was able to do it against elite prospects and show that those things aren't going to be as much as a problem for him. If you're worried about him being able to live on an island, just look at his one-on-one tape at the Senior Bowl. He was excellent. Another player I like is Christian Jones. He's more of a 4th round prospect if you do want to trade up from 156, and I do think you would have to trade up from 156 to get him. He's somebody I see as a swing prospect, right? Like he can go ahead, play both sides, eventually be a veteran 6-man for you. And I think that'd be a very useful thing for this Cleveland Browns team to have in their back pocket. And then Dwayne Carter out of Duke, defensive interior tackle. Really like him as a 3-tech, just a big traditional 3-tech that wins with quick hands and great ball get off. And he would be somebody you can get in that 4th, 5th round range that I would be interested in too.
All right. Before we go to break, Adam Schefter tweets this out. Started hearing about it late yesterday. Bengals 3-time Pro Bowler edge rusher Trey Hendrickson requested a trade from Cincinnati per league sources. Hendrickson due $15 million this season, looking for more long-term security than Cincinnati has been willing to offer. That's Adam Schefter tweeting that out. Also, Adam Schefter tweeting out, Bengals franchise tag T. Higgins requested to be traded, being that there have been no contract talks between he and the team in over a year now. So kind of interesting, Quincy, some of the Bengals looking to get paid a little bit better.
Yeah, they're going to have to change how they do things. The Bengals don't love to give guaranteed money. And, as much as people villainize guaranteed money because Deshaun Watson got it in his contract, guaranteed money is not always a bad thing. It avoids situations like this. You want to know why Myles Garrett's not kicking and screaming about not being the top 5 paid edge rusher? Because the Browns put a lot of guaranteed money in that deal, so it doesn't benefit him to do something like this. But when you run out of guarantees, the players run out of incentives to really go with the program, and then you end up with this kind of situation here with T. Higgins. That's not really a guaranteed money thing, but this Trey Hendrickson thing is, right? And that's going to be the Bengals' big question this offseason is, are they going to be willing to spend the cash, not the cap space, they have the cap space, but the cash necessary to compete and sit at the big boys table? Because right now it doesn't look like they're willing to spend that cash. Yes, they'll keep Joe Burrow. They'll probably keep Jamar Chase. But somebody like Trey Hendrickson is integral to what the Bengals need to do in order to be successful. We talk about it all the time on here. The Bengals are successful because of that defense, right? That defense is what puts them over the top and makes them a contending team. And Trey Hendrickson's gone, then that defensive line is completely dismantled from the year prior. You lose DJ Reader and Trey Hendrickson. And then that puts more pressure on your secondary, and that secondary hasn't been good. They weren't good stopping the run last year with Trey Hendrickson. They're going to be even worse stopping the run this year. And all of a sudden, that defense that can hold it down for an inconsistent offense is not being able to do that. And now we notice how inconsistent the Bengals offense is because the defense isn't always bailing them out. So it really just kind of destroys what the Bengals want to do. Yes, you can keep some star players, but if you want to be one of those top tier teams, you got to be able to have the cash to keep guys like that happy. And right now, this is a horrible sign if you're a Bengals fan of your ability to do that.
Quincy Carrier and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we continue talking Browns on draft day. Sports for CLE. Be right back. Stay with us.
Play Maximum Millions and $2 million Ultimate Cash from the Ohio Lottery, and you may never look at scratch-offs the same way again.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled, Unfiltered Browns coverage. Quincy, I know you've addressed this on your show. The trade talk and the Deshaun Watson trade talk, and we just got done talking about the Bengals and the contract with Burrow and Chase and what it's done to them. Can you imagine? Everybody keeps talking about how the contract from Deshaun Watson has hamstrung the Browns, roster. They keep making moves.
Yeah, imagine if Denzel Ward requested a trade and like Zadarius Smith. Boy, would people be writing all kind of articles about how the Browns dug themselves into this hole by being irresponsible, by spending all of this money. But, the Browns have figured out a way to get around it. They're willing to spend the cash to sit at the table and put together a contending team, and that's what makes the difference, right? The salary cap, the Bengals ain't in salary cap problems, right? You look at the Bengals salary cap, they got a bunch of space. They got this cap room to do it. The issue is they don't have the cash to do it, or they don't want to spend the cash to do it. So, my hope, if I'm being hopeful here, is that maybe this recalibrates everybody's scope on this thing, and they understand that cash is a little bit more important than salary cap space, because salary cap space is just an accounting mechanism. You can always manipulate it if you want to bad enough.
All right, Jerry Jeudy. Good, bad, ugly. Again, something you've addressed on your show. Take us through that.
Yeah, so I looked at film of Jerry Jeudy over the last 2 years, and the good thing about Jerry Jeudy, he's an excellent route runner. When you put him in that slot and you let him get one-on-one with somebody who's not like a real physical corner, he's going to really be able to beat those guys and get downfield really well. I think he struggled in Denver at times because Russell Wilson throws some of the most baffling footballs that you will see in the NFL as of recently. Like, he just throws these things into the air. He's wide open. He doesn't get it on time. Like, just some bad footballs by Russ. But that's not the whole story on Jerry Jeudy. There's stuff that he definitely needs to improve. He definitely needs to get better at catching through contact. He had a lot of what aren't technically drops, but what we would call as fans drops, where, he had a play he could have made, but the contact was too much for him. He needs to get better at finishing through contact. He needs to get better at making some of these routine plays. And he needs to get better at just mentally making sure he stays checked in at all times in the game. But if he can do that, and I think that there's a good chance that those things can improve slightly with the Cleveland Browns, and even if it improves slightly with the Browns, he will be a much better receiver on paper.
All right, most underrated signing for 2024 for the Browns.
Got to go with Jordan Hicks, right? Like a guy who's going to start for this team that we have not really talked about as if he's going to start for this team. I guess Quentin Jefferson can fit under this role too, because he's likely to start as well. But Jordan Hicks is there because he should be an upgrade over what Anthony Walker was able to give you. You're losing a key piece in Sione Takitaki. And look, if I have a most underrated signing, he's the most underrated departure, because Sione Takitaki made plays last year for this Cleveland Browns team. And he's made plays his entire career as a Cleveland Brown. Like, that's somebody that you're going to miss a little bit. So the question is, can Jordan Hicks step in there at that starting role in these nickel sets and make plays similar to Sione Takitaki? If he can, this defense will be rolling. If he can't, we'll be wondering why we're not as good against the run as we were last year.
Yeah, the one thing about Hicks, people tend to overlook 5 straight years of over 100 tackles. It's consistency.
Yeah, and they needed more short tacklers there, right? When you have JOK and you have Grant Delpit, who are great instinctive players, and they move so fast sometimes that they do miss tackles in the backfield, you do need somebody who can clean up, right? Like, you're not going to be first on the scene. But if he gets tripped up a little bit, we need a short tackler there, and I think that's also a pivotal role that Jordan Hicks is going to be asked to fold.
All right. Why do you think the Browns do not want to sign Kareem Hunt? Why do you think they've moved beyond Kareem Hunt?
I just think he's older. He's really only a short yardage back at this point of his career. There seems to be some kind of baggage with him. Like, I don't really understand what it would be, but there seems to be some kind of baggage with him. Like, it's always been addressed whenever he comes back to the team, between the front office. Like, there's something that happened that rubbed people the wrong way. And he's just older. In Devontae, they feel like Donta Foreman is a better overall running back than what Kareem Hunt is at this point in his career. So they're just going to go with him.
What about injury? Have the Browns kind of guarded themselves against injuries, do you think, given what they went through a year ago?
Yeah, see, this is a really deep team, right? And they can withstand injuries at a lot of areas. Obviously there's the big ones that they can't, and I'm not even going to name them because I'm not going to put that energy out there in the universe. But yeah, there's some injuries that can happen to this team that can really hurt it. But other than that, they're kind of filled at tackle. They have 3 tackles that they can go to, and they'll probably add another one in the draft. They probably might add a guard too. So I think that this team is in a position where they can withstand some injuries, and they kind of went into the offseason with that in mind, that they want to be bulletproof. And that doesn't mean that you don't get a single injury, but it's like, hey, if we get one injury that pops up here, we're not going to lose a game that we're supposed to win just because we had that one injury.
Yeah, last year it seemed like they attacked position groups at various times of the year. You had them in the tackle room, you had them in the safeties.
Yeah, it was just a wild bug, right? Where it almost felt like COVID, right, Dave? Where it's like, not just one guy gets hurt, it wipes out the entire room. Like, remember that game versus the Jets they had in 2020 where they didn't have any wide receivers? And then I believe there was a game this year where we didn't have any wide receivers left to really go to. So it's fascinating that could happen in a non-COVID-like situation. But yeah, it was definitely a rough go for that team with the injury bug. And you have to imagine that it can't, well, not going to put that out there, but you have to imagine that things improve.
All right. It's kind of interesting. So if the Bears and the Patriots take a first-round quarterback in this draft, which they likely will, it'll be the second time in 4 drafts that both of them have done that. It's only happened 6 times so far in NFL history. And this is a list you do not want to be on. The Cardinals, 2018, 2019, Josh Rosen, Kyler Murray. Browns, 2012, this one's really painful. Brandon Weeden, Johnny Manziel. Jaguars, 2011, 2013, Gabbert and Bortles. The Seahawks, 1991-93, McGuire and Meyer. The Vikings in 2011 and 2014, Ponder and Bridgewater. And the Commanders / Redskins, well, they were the Redskins then, they're the Commanders now. So they're 2002 and 2005, Ramsey and Campbell. Good Lord, talking about not being able to get the position correct.
Hey, man, when you're drafting the 3rd or 4th quarterback available, or you're drafting a quarterback in a draft class where nobody thinks that there's a quarterback in, you end up in situations like that. Hey, shout out to Pittsburgh. Might be on that list soon, right? Because they're going to have to. Yeah. They might have to take a quarterback at some point, right? Like, they ain't got who they want anymore. But, yeah, when you're doing that, we know as Browns fans, that's kind of how you end up in quarterback purgatory is, when you are taking swings at the 4th quarterback on the board, and then that doesn't work out, and then you come back and you swing around. You're like, well, I don't want to do it in the 1st round. Let's do it in the 3rd round. Let's be smart and get Cody Kessler. And then you start Cody. The Browns could be on that list for like 8 years straight. Like, I'm shocked that we only pulled up 2 years that happened. I felt like they were doing it every other year, where they were drafting somebody, going away from somebody, and then drafting somebody again after that. Like, it felt like we went Colt McCoy, right? Colt McCoy had to be there. But anyways, I digress before I bring up all my trauma about what the Browns used to be. But yeah, man, like, when you're drafting the 3rd or 4th quarterback available, this is where you usually end up, right? Like, you're praying that somebody beats the odds to be your franchise quarterback. But unless that 3rd or 4th quarterback available is in one of the strongest quarterback classes in your recent memory, then you better off just not taking him.
Yeah, and some of it has to do with luck. I mean, the year Joe Burrow came out, there wasn't another. If you had the number 1 pick, you were taking Joe Burrow. There wasn't any discussion. It's not. I mean, I know Caleb Williams is kind of like that this year, but I'm not completely sold on him.
Well, even if you're not sold on him,
you gotta take
that
him.
is a chance worth taking on Caleb Williams, right?
Absolutely.
Like that. Do you see everything is there? Sometimes you get it's one thing to do that, Dave, when it's Caleb Williams and you see everything that could be successful. It's another thing when you're doing this for Ryan Tannehill or Jay Clocker or Blaine Gabbert, right? Where you're like, he kind of got it. That's where you don't want to be at.
Right. And you know what? The position is so important. That's why people take chances like that. Quincy Carrier and I can step aside, take a quick time out. We will continue talking drafts. Most underrated player in the draft, 5 prospects the Browns should avoid, according to BrownsWire.com. Straight ahead on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. This from PFF. Most underrated wide receiver in this year's draft class. They go with Malik Washington from Virginia. Now he's 5'8", like 200 pounds. But here are the receiving grades. 92.4, second. Receptions, 111. First, receiving yards, 1384. Second, yards after the catch, 710. Third, yards per route run, 3.15. Tied for 12th. Missed tackles forced, 35. That's tied for first in the FBS. So he's a guy, Quincy, to be honest with you, I've seen him. I've heard people talk about him. The size scares me. It just does.
Yeah, you always worry about somebody who's 5'8" at wide receiver, or just these shorter wide receivers in general, because you're not just asking them to be regular good. In order to be successful in the NFL at 5'8", you got to be spectacular, right? Like, you got to be one of the best wide receivers technically on your team just for that to happen. It's just so much to ask out of somebody. And then you're asking that from somebody who, he played in the ACC for the Virginia Cavaliers. So it's not necessarily like the top tier competition, right? It's not Big Ten, it's not SEC. So, you're kind of projecting a little bit there. It's a tough ask for somebody at 5'8" at wide receiver. And if we're talking about from a Browns perspective, we joke about how we don't have that many tall wide receivers. I would not be thrilled about going after a 5'8" guy.
Yep, I'm with you. And there's some thought he'll be day 3. So if you're telling me 6th round, you want to take a flyer? All right, I guess. These are 6 prospects the Browns should avoid, according to BrownsWire.com. First, they go with Troy Franklin, wide receiver from Oregon. Worried about his slender 174-pound frame, worried about his ability to consistently track the ball downfield, worried about his potential to run a full route tree, not just stride it out on the vertical plane. So, again, that's from Browns Wire. And you know what? All those things, those would concern me too.
Yeah. Troy Franklin is definitely one that I've heard a lot of concern about. There's some people who are dead set evangelists for him that think that he's going to be a number 1 receiver in the NFL. There are other people who just don't see him as a football player. So yeah, he's definitely somebody interesting to talk about.
All right, number 2 on this list, a tight end, Jatavian Sanders. For starters, this guy can't block a lick. While he runs a fast 40, his explosiveness testing fell well below par, hitting just 30 inches in the vertical, 9 feet 6 inches in the broad jump. Sanders overlaps and does not complement the skill set of David Njoku at all. If we're being honest, a good comparison for Sanders is Dollar Tree David Njoku. That might be one of my favorite lines of a draft comp that I've read. So Dollar Store David Njoku.
That's a very harsh write-up on Jatavion. Look, he's a project, right? You have to work with him. So what you see on tape isn't necessarily all that you want out of him, right? You're not asking him to be the same guy that he was at Texas. And some of this stuff can get fixed, right? David Njoku did not block a lick at the University of Miami either. And explosiveness, while I think it matters at some positions more than others, I don't really think I need my tight end to be super explosive given the route tree that they're going to be asked to run. So I'm not as low on Jatavion as this writer is, but I could see why people would be hesitant about doing it.
Yeah, the one thing about him needs to get his strength. You know, somebody pointed out to me that his, I think he did 5 reps on the bench, and Njoku did 22 at the combine. So that is something you can work on. That's something you can improve.
Now, to be fair, like, not everybody's David Njoku. Like, David Njoku is, what, 6'8" wingspan and able to do 20? That's insane.
Now, the point being, though, you can improve the strength. You can get that up. Yeah. That's just a matter of locking him in the weight room and saying, you're going to do some bench presses here, Jatavion. All right, number 3 on this list, defensive lineman Brandon Doras from Oregon. Too small to play the 3 technique, not athletic enough to win on the edge. Weighed in at 283 pounds, 21st among defensive tackles. Does not play with strength on tape, 2-gap, anchor double, or with ease from the interior. So again, some concerns with Doras. I've seen him in that second round range, late second, early third round range.
Yeah, I'm not really too familiar with Brandon Doras, to be honest with you. But there are other defensive linemen that I like in this class. You know, I do think that, again, Dwayne Carter and Michael Hart are people I would look at before I would look at him.
All right, another one on this list, Jeremiah Trotter, linebacker, Clemson. Despite being undersized and unathletic, Trotter consistently gets mocked on day 2. That's when, looking at his tape, Trotter's eyes are consistently in the wrong spot, forcing his teammates to correct. So Trotter is a guy that, you know, seems to be a favorite. There's some instinct there, but I get what they're saying.
Yeah. Corey was going at him in this one. But yeah, Jeremiah, I think there are better linebackers out there. I think Corey's a much bigger fan of Edrin Cooper from Texas A&M, and then also the guy from Michigan. I am blanking on his name. Junior Colson is the one that would make more sense for him.
Yep, and again, this is Corey Kinnan who wrote this for Browns Wire. All right, Tandre Sweat, defensive tackle from the Browns, is the final one on this list. Browns are looking for another defensive tackle. They're better off going with guys who can shoot gaps and penetrate against the pass at a higher level. Michael Hall, Mekhi Wingo could be much better fits in Cleveland. Sweat, you know, also has the thing with the DUI and that. If he falls far enough and the Browns are confident, you know, that that's not an issue, I could see them taking a flyer on him 4th or 5th round.
The Tandre Sweat thing is interesting because, like, under normal circumstances, I would have no reason to believe that the Browns would be interested in him. But the only reason I'm, like, hesitant on thinking that is they took Siaki Ika last year. Yep. And, like, that breaks my evaluation of what they want at defensive tackle. Like, I thought I had a good grip on it, but then Jim Schwartz walks in and he takes Siaki Ika. And if you would take Siaki Ika and Tandre Sweat is there in day 3, I can't imagine a team that took Siaki Ika last year would avoid Tandre Sweat for whatever reason, right? Because Tandre Sweat is a better version of Siaki Ika. That being said, I agree with Corey's points here that I don't think that this is what the Browns need at defensive tackle.
Quincy, Carrier, and I are going to step aside, take one more time out, other side of the break. take a look at Amari Cooper versus Jamar Chase as far as the numbers go. Also, what does it mean if the Browns take a tackle? What does it mean if they take a wide receiver in the draft? Sports for CLE. Be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Quincy Kerr, Untitled, Unfiltered Browns coverage. This is from Jack Duffin of the Orange and Brown Report. If the Browns end day 2 without a tackle, the chances of Wills being extended goes up. If the Browns end day 2 without a wide receiver, chances of Cooper being extended go up. Draft spot rosters 2025 and beyond, more so than 2024. So, Quincy, I think even if they take a wide receiver in the second round, which is day 2, the second and third round, I think they're probably going to try to extend Cooper. Jedrick Wills, though, I think if they take a tackle in the second or third round, that might signal that they're thinking about, I won't say definitely, they're at least considering moving on from Jedrick Wills when his extension ends.
Yeah, Jed's an interesting situation because the consistency of play just hasn't been what you wanted it to be, but it's not at a level that's so bad that you can't have him out there, or that it can be easily replaced by anybody that you draft. It's possible that somebody you get in the second round could supersede Jed in level of play, but it's not necessarily a guarantee. With Amari Cooper, wide receiver to me is a position that if you have enough depth, it can be a little bit more expendable than offensive line. So I think, if they do draft a wide receiver, they might see Amari Cooper as a little bit more expendable than what we're anticipating. But yeah, I think that they're going to get a tackle in the second round. But if they don't, then definitely it does mean that if they feel more comfortable about Jed for whatever reason than we do, and they're probably going to give him some kind of skinny extension.
Yeah, I still think, when you look at strictly production, you've got Cooper, and nobody else has really done it consistently. So, you have to try to find a way to kind of extend that till you find out, okay, can Judy be what we want him to be? Can Moore be what we want him to be? Can the guys, will Tillman develop? Even if you draft a guy. And to that point, this is Amari Cooper versus Jamar Chase the past 2 years. Cooper has 148 more receiving yards, 4 more yards per catch on average, 6.2 more of his team's receiving, 6.2% more of his team's receiving yards, 6.7% more of his team's touchdowns, 8.6 more of his team's contested catches, 19 less targets. Now, there are some other factors that go into that. There's T. Higgins, there's Tyler Boyd that are on the Bengals receiving core. But that shows you how elite, Amari Cooper's production has been. It's been better than Jamar Chase's. And he's about to get $30-some million a year in his extension.
And to be fair to Jamar Chase, teams do cover him differently than Amari Cooper. It usually takes Amari Cooper to have a 200-yard game for people to start just deciding that you're just not going to throw the ball to him. But yeah, Coop's been a very productive number 1 receiver for this team. I would not be excited to see the Browns move off of him. I'm just thinking about the numbers game and how they'll see it. And if they got a bunch of guys that they drafted in the second, third round waiting to play, they're going to want those guys to play. And Coop is getting towards 30. We know how the Browns feel about 30. So, that's the math that I'm using for it. But Amari Cooper's been a tremendous player for the Cleveland Browns.
Yep. I think they try to do something for a couple of years, some higher money up front, signing bonuses, and then voidable years. So we'll see. They're pretty good at coming up with creative contract structures. So this one, Cooper's going to put that to the test, I think. Mike Renner tweets this out. It's really interesting. Prospects that will be only 20 years old when they're drafted. And we know the Browns value that younger draft prospect. So Jonathan Brooks, running back from Texas. Braylon Allen, running back from Wisconsin. Audric Estime, running back from Notre Dame. So 3 running backs. Neighbors will be gone by the time the Browns pick. Keon Coleman, that's a guy I didn't realize was that young. Xavier Worthy. Also Michael Hall, Nate Wiggins, Kalen Bullock. Again, all those guys, 20 years old when they get drafted this weekend. So when you look at that, who are some guys you think would fit with the Browns?
I think Keon Coleman would fit with the Browns there if he's available at 54. Michael Hall is somebody I think would fit with this team. Xavier Worthy is also somebody I think that would be like Keon Coleman and Xavier Worthy are definitely part of the Browns packet there at 54, right? Like they probably have a packet of 4 or 5 players that they're like, if they're here, we're not going to play around. We're just going to take them. I think Keon Coleman and Xavier Worthy are in that.
Do you think Estime and Allen are guys that if they can find a way to get into the 4th round or they slip to the 5th round that they look at running back wise?
Maybe the 5th, right? Maybe the 5th. If it's a low ever pick, I think more 206 is where they would think. They got a bunch of running backs on this roster already. They still have Pierre Strong. They have Jerome Ford. They signed They signed Hines. They also signed Donta Foreman. They have Nick Chubb on the roster. I believe I'm at 5. John Kelly makes 6. That tells me when they have that many guys rostered for camp that they don't really think that this class has a lot to offer them at that running back position, because they would have to move off of one of those guys, and I don't think they're willing to do that. So I think the Browns are pretty out on running back in this class, but we'll see what happens come tomorrow and the day after.
All right, this is from CBSSports.com. Every team's most desired draft do-over. We know the Browns have plenty of them, but with the Browns, they say Kellen Winslow.
Really?
6th pick overall, 2004. This choice isn't as much about the player drafted as it is about the player the Browns did not draft. Cleveland missed out on a golden opportunity to select Ben Roethlisberger. That's kind of interesting. Myself, Gilbert, we were talking about Gilbert and Manziel. Those two are interesting. But, yeah, they had the opportunity to get a quarterback that played for, 19, 18 years? And they took a tight end.
I don't know. I think that one's like, it's part of that whole Big Ben lie that he tells everybody he wanted to come to Cleveland. Like, he never wanted to come to the Cleveland Browns. He was praying that the Browns didn't draft him there. But, like, there are other drafts where the Browns missed out on quarterback. I mean, you could look at the first Browns draft that they had since coming back. I mean, Donovan McNabb went 2nd overall. They went with Tim Couch. And you could argue that maybe the offensive line would have made the same story for Donovan McNabb. But all I know is that Donovan McNabb had a significant NFL career, and Tim Couch did not have a significant NFL career. So I guess if you want to look at that as the one time the Browns had a chance to get a franchise quarterback, you can go there. It's probably one of the cleanest times. But the Browns have traded their pick so many times in that era that you don't know how many opportunities they had to go get the quarterback that they've wanted. They've had plenty of opportunities to get quarterbacks in the last 20 years. I think the issue with the Cleveland Browns is kind of shown with this selection, which is for 20 years, this team remained passive about the quarterback position and thought that they could outsmart the league by drafting guys in the 20s or drafting guys in the 3rd round to start. Getting Kellen Winslow over a quarterback, if you thought that highly of him, probably is just emblematic of that whole decision-making process that lasted like somehow 10 GMs.
All right, before I let you go, who do you think the Browns end up with at 54?
Who I think they end up with at 54? I think they end up with a tackle. My best guess is that they go with not Blake Fisher. That would be later. Maybe Blake Fisher. I'll go Blake Fisher. Do something new today. Let's go Blake Fisher today.
All right. I think they're going defensive tackle. I think they end up with the Ohio State kid, Michael Hall. Quincy Carrier, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Quincy.
All right. Thank you.
Quincy Carrier, make sure you check him out. Untitled, unfiltered Browns coverage, always really good stuff. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Jackson McCurry from the Dawgland podcast straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Play Maximum Millions and $2 million Ultimate Cash from the Ohio Lottery, and you may never look at scratch-offs the same way again.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on Sports for CLE. Mel Kiper, Field Yates from the First Draft show on ESPN, talking about a wide receiver from Washington, Jalen Polk.
It's Jalen Polk, the Washington wide receiver, who I think probably goes somewhere in that second round. Jalen Polk, the other Washington wide receiver, perhaps the other Washington wide receiver in some people's eyes. He spent 1 year at Texas Tech. Actually came from the same high school as Des Bryant. Talk about that for some lineage. This guy is tough. He makes so many contested catches, Mel, and he makes so many catches that aren't necessarily the highlight reel Odell Beckham Jr. catching the football with 2 fingers, but makes so many catches that are in tight areas or when he's posting up a perimeter corner. Doing things outside of his frame so consistently, making the difficult things look effortless. I think the run after catch skill is fine. I get it. He had a 4.5 240. Not going to blow you away in that regard, Mel. But if you're looking for a guy who is consistently making the difficult things look easy, it's Jalen Polk. He had a wonderful game against Michigan State in which he was making catches like he was part of Cirque du Soleil, was great at the pro day. Love seeing the energy he brought to the table here, Mel. I'm in on Jalen Polk. I think he deserves to go somewhere in the second round.
With that, let's welcome in Jackson McCurry from the Dawgland podcast. Jackson, Polk, Jalen Polk, what do you think of him?
Yeah, I definitely like him. I think he's in the mix in that late second round at 54 for the Browns. I mean, Field hit it all right there. Good size, good frame, tough, especially in the vertical game. He mentioned the yards after the catch. He's good. He's not great at it, but I think he's definitely in the mix there for the Browns in 54. I think if they want to look at receiver, if Amari Cooper's not in the long-term cards, and then you only have Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman basically after this year, like receiver is something the Browns need to address at some point early in the draft, and I think Polk is definitely one of those guys that are in the mix.
All right, so you've done a mock draft for Dogs by Nature. We're going to take a look at the first 3 picks of that mock draft. So you do have a trade. You have the Browns trading pick 54 to the Buccaneers for 57 and a future third. Then with that pick at 57, you have Xavier Legette, wide receiver from South Carolina, being available. In the third round, you have the Browns going for Amagaji, the offensive tackle from Yale. And then in the 5th round, getting the tight end that many feel they need, Theo Johnson from Penn State. So take us through this. We'll start with Legette. What do you like about Legette if he's there when the Browns pick in the 2nd round?
Yeah, if you want that guy that's got the great ability after the catch, Xavier Legette's one of those guys. I was surprised he fell to 57 in the simulator when I was doing my mock. I don't see that being reality. I think he probably goes early in the 2nd round, but if you want that guy that's tough, that's fast, that's physical, Xavier Legette's one of those guys.
Amagaji from Yale. I see a lot of people kind of drawing the connection between the Browns and Amagaji. What do you like about him?
I just love that he's got the potential. He's got the size. He's a great blocker. I think there's still room for him to develop, which I think is great that you don't have to throw him out there right away because we have such a deep tackle room, barring health, which I think is the biggest key there. He also has the flexibility. He played guard his sophomore year at Yale. Was the starting right guard. So at worst case scenario, you kick him inside and he is your long-term guard, potentially replacing Bitonio or Teller. But I do think he's got the ability and all the fundamentals. He does have to work on some things, but to eventually replace Jed Wills at left tackle.
All right, and in the 5th round, Theo Johnson, tight end from Penn State. What do you like about him?
Just the raw athleticism. Yeah, he's a little older, but he blew everybody away at the combine. He's a touchdown machine at Penn State. Got great size, which makes me think he's going to develop into a solid blocker at the next level in the NFL. So I think that's something that the Browns really need to do. They need to find a number 2 that fits alongside Njoku. I mean, there's some other tight ends in this class where I think Jatavian Sanders is at 1 where he doesn't really fit alongside Njoku, but I think Theo Johnson definitely could be that guy.
All right. Along those lines, this from Dog Pound Daily. 3 likely picks for the Browns at pick 54 if they choose to stay there. So 2nd round, late 2nd round. Number 1, they go wide receiver Troy Franklin from Oregon. Number 2, the aforementioned Jatavian Sanders, tight end from Texas. And number 3, they go to the defensive side of the ball, defensive tackle Michael Hall from Ohio State, who we know fits the age guardrails, a youngin'. Of those, which makes the most sense to you for the Browns?
The most sense, I would say, is Michael Hall because he helps on the defensive line. I think they could add another D tackle at some point. I don't think it's a given that they will, but I think Hall makes the most sense. But my personal preference would be Troy Franklin. This was a guy that I saw a year ago when I started studying the 2024 prospects. I followed him all the way through this year. I know some of the negatives people have with his game, but if he develops into a solid number 2 receiver and we have to find that number 1 if it's not Jerry Jeudy or if Amari Cooper's not here long term, I think Troy Franklin is somebody that can help this Browns offense for sure long term.
When you mentioned you've looked at him, the knock, one of the big knocks, I think he weighs 175 pounds, something like that. Does he play bigger than that? Is that, how does that not affect his play negatively, I guess?
I don't see him playing bigger than that. He's a guy that's a vertical threat. He's got the speed. He didn't have the best combine, especially in the gauntlet drill, just the way he was catching the ball. So I do think that is a negative on him. I don't think he makes it to 54. If he does, I'd be stunned. But he is a guy I still like, and is still a player that I think that can be developed into a solid NFL receiver.
Jackson McCurry from the Dawgland podcast, as always. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Jackson.
Of course, Dave. Have a good one, man.
All right, Jackson McCurry, make sure you check him out. Dawgland podcast. Very insightful stuff. Does this work with the draft, and we appreciate him joining us with that mock draft. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. We turn our attention to the Cavaliers getting ready for Game 3 in Orlando against the Magic. Sam Amico from hoopswire.com. Straight ahead. Stay with us.
Play Maximum Millions and $2 million Ultimate Cash from the Ohio Lottery, and you may never look at scratch-offs the same way again.
Sports4CLE continues. We turn our attention to the Cavaliers getting ready for Game 3 in Orlando in a few hours. Cavs have not trailed in the first 2 games of the series, have been tied for something like 14 seconds total with the Magic. They're 10-3 in their last 13 matchups against the Orlando Magic. Let's welcome in Sam Amico from hoopswire.com. Sam, when you look at how the Cavs have dominated the Magic, how important is Game 3?
I think it's pretty important because you want to keep setting that tone, right? You know, like you said, it's been 14 seconds of a tie game. The Cavs have led the rest of the way. I think maybe that 14 seconds has been 0-0 because I can't think of any other times that the Magic were able to tie the game. But you know, you're going into a different environment, right? They always say a playoff series doesn't start until both teams have played a home game. Well, here the Cavs, you know, can they keep it going? What they've done so well in those first 2 games, can they do that for now 2 games in Orlando? So it's pretty vital. You want to set this tone and you know, kind of, so to speak, put your neck on the or your foot on the Magic's neck here, and you know, give yourself what in NBA playoff history is an insurmountable 3-0 lead. I think that's really got to be. I don't know that the Cavs have to get a 3-0 lead, but they really have to show the Magic that they're in charge still.
Yeah, I mean, right now, the Magic probably deep down, most of them don't believe they're in that series. And the worst thing in the world the Cavs can do is let a young team believe that they have a chance.
Yeah, that's just it. You don't want to give them any semblance of life because I will say this, the Magic are a very confident team, even though they're young, and they know that they have nothing to lose. Nobody expects them to get out of this series. So I expect that they would be playing, you know, in front of the home fans a little more loose, seemed tight in those first 2 games, befuddled, you know, and just way out of sorts. I expect that they would get their act together at home, realizing, look, nobody expects us to win. Nobody even expected the Orlando Magic to be there. Nobody predicted they'd be the number 5 seed in the Eastern Conference. So I just think that their mindset is going to be, you know, let's go out and just do whatever we can to, you know, try to pull off an upset and make people realize, you know, we're for real. So the Cavs have to be very cognizant of that. And I think that for the most part, you know, as long as they continue to defend like they have in those first 2 games, it won't matter how determined the Magic are.
So along those lines, Cavs have held the Magic to just 12 of 72 shooting. That's just over 23%. .236 shooting from three-point line in the series. Lowest three-point percentage allowed through the first 2 games of a playoff series in Cavs history. Magic also just shooting a little bit above 34% from the field, averaging 84.5 points a game. What have you noticed with the Cavs defense?
Yeah, I think a big part of that is you look at the Cavs. Well, first of all, the Cavs defense, really, Jared Allen and Evan Mobley have done such a wonderful job of protecting the paint that, you know, it kind of forces the Magic to go outside in the perimeter, and when they're not making shots, this is a team that his, all season has struggled to shoot from the perimeter, Orlando. So I think right now what we're seeing is the Cavs giving them those shots until they make them. And Orlando really, Dave, is a lot like the Cavs were last season, and that's why the Cavs went out and got Max Strus and George Niang and, gave Sam Merrill some more time, and it was because they needed outside shooting for the playoffs. And we look at the Orlando Magic right now, and clearly that's what they're lacking. So until they start making it from out there, the Cavs are going to let them take it. If they start making them, then they're going to have to switch up the defense. But, right now, Orlando can't find any answers from the perimeter. And then, of course, they're struggling inside. As you mentioned, Dave, haven't scored 90 points in either of the first two games. And a lot of that is just, Mobley and Allen, even George Niang defensively is just, they're all being pests around the basket. And I think that's really impacted them. And then Karis LeVert, Isaac Okoro, Donovan Mitchell, those guys have been doing a great job on the wings and pressuring the basketball just to keep, so far so good. The Magic have just been totally out of sorts.
So Donovan Mitchell's been really good in the first two games without question. What have you seen in the first two games that maybe we're not talking or who we're not talking enough about their performance in these first two playoff games for the Cavs?
Well, I don't know that we're not talking enough about it, but Jared Allen has just been magnificent. You're talking, averaging 19 rebounds in two games. He got 18 the first game, 20 in the last, and he's had 16 points in each game. Just really been, obviously Donovan Mitchell's been the reason you're winning the series, but Jared Allen's really been a 1A in terms of he's having a career season. In the regular season, he had a career year, and now he's even stepped it up a little bit more in the playoffs. And it's, obviously he's been extra determined after, hearing that narrative that he'd been pushed around and that the lights were too bright against the Knicks. He's done the opposite, really, against the Magic, which are actually a bigger team than the Knicks. I mean, you're talking Jonathan Isaac, All-Star Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner, and Jonathan Isaac, and Wendell Carter Jr. is the other one. I mean, you're talking about, 5 guys there who are like 6'10" and up. And Allen and also Mobley have just done a magnificent job. But I would really say, you can't give Jared Allen enough credit for what he's done in this series. Just a total about face from last year's first round.
The other thing that kind of strikes me, and we've delineated, the Cavs have dominated this series. They really haven't got what they thought they'd get from Max Strus and George Niang yet. So there's still a lot of upside that's untapped there.
Yeah, that's the one area. You brought in Max Strus and George Niang to knock down shots in situations like this, and they haven't done it yet. And you assume that one of them's going to get going here, at some point in Orlando. And the Cavs are going to need them moving forward, whether, the rest of this series, and if they should advance to the second round, they're going to need Strus and Niang to knock down those shots, especially now. We've heard Dean Wade. The Cavs announced Dean Wade's out for the series. And J.B. Bickerstaff, true to form, is really only playing 8 guys with Niang, LeVert, and Isaac Okoro coming off the bench. And I think Karis LeVert, who really had the best first-round series for the Cavs last year against the Knicks, has yet to get going. He doesn't need to score 30, but I think one of those 3 guys off the bench, and it's probably going to be LeVert or Niang, really need to start connecting. Max Strus, same thing. Donovan Mitchell was 2 of 10 on threes in game 2, so the Cavs haven't done a great job shooting from the perimeter. They'll do it in spurts and then, miss 7 or 8 in a row, it seems. But, you're right, Dave. One of those guys, Niang and Strus, that's why you brought him here, to knock down those shots. And, I think at some point they will. It's just you can't wait too long. You got to start making those because they're getting good looks.
All right, assuming the Cavs are able to close this out in 4 or 5, what do you think their confidence level is going on to the next round where it's probably going to be the top seed Celtics?
Yeah, they've got to get some things cleaned up. I think they realize that. Defensively, I think they know if they defend like they have been against Orlando, it's going to go pretty well for them in other rounds. Now, teams like Boston, assuming they get past the Heat, which even though that series is tied 1-1, I still think they will. But, Boston, those guys don't have trouble shooting from the perimeter, so you're going to have to mix up your defense a little bit. They've got, 2 veteran all-stars in Tatum and Brown. So, the Cavs are just going to have to kind of mix things up a little defensively. They're going to have to be better offensively in a second-round series. No matter who you play, you're really going to need Strus, Niang, some of the others to knock down those outside shots. It's just a different dynamic. But I think once you win a series, to answer your question, Dave, you're feeling really good about yourself. You have a lot of confidence. And the Cavs know they won 17 of 18 in January. What were they doing then that they can carry over to now? And I think we're starting to see some of that a little bit in the first 2 games.
Sam Amico, hoopswire.com. As always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and insight. I am sure we will check back in with you as the series continues. Thanks, Sam.
All right, Dave. Thanks a lot for having me. We'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Sam Amico. Make sure you check him out, hoopswire.com. Really good stuff about the Cavs and the entire NBA playoff time. Hoopswire.com, the place to go. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.